Simone Elias, and this is my book, Old Films, Young Eyes, A Teenage Take on Hollywood's Golden Age. It talks about why old films are still relevant today in many different pop cultural landscapes and why teenagers should watch them. I've got a new interview on Joy on Paper Live that was such a joy to film, and I hope you'll tune in and watch it.
Hi, this is Patsy with a Z. Welcome to Joy on Paper, a program for writers and those who dream of writing, and for everyone who wants to know the story behind the book. And oh boy, do we have a wonderful story behind this book. And my guest today is Simone. Oh, Elias. And I am so happy to welcome you. Simone, oh, it's fantastic. It's amazing. Everything's perfect today. Your book, Old Films, Young Eyes, a teenage take on Hollywood's golden age. It was meant for me. Your book was meant for me because I'll show you right now, and I have a collection of these. Look at this.
Nice.
Yeah. I love these. I collect these, and this one was 10 cents. And in it, we have all of the stars that you're talking about, including many of course, my favorites and your favorites. Barbara Stanwyck.
Oh, yes.
And there's so many. And as I said, I collect these. I love these magazines. It's just so much fun to look at them. They were so beautiful. Weren't they beautiful?
Oh, definitely. Yes.
I don't know where to start with this. I'm so excited about this book. I do love that you put your acknowledgments at the front of the book. Mary Higgins Clark, when she was on my program, she told me that when she first started doing that, the publisher said, no, the acknowledgments go at the back. And she said, no. She said, my readers are the ones that I want to know that I'm grateful to people. So when I saw that, I said, oh, that's nice. Sort of when we're talking about classy movies, I thought, well, that's a classy move.
It's sort of like, they used to put the credits at the beginning of a movie. So I thought it was sort of like that.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I got the same feeling. I said to myself, she's one classy girl and a teenager. I almost hate to ask how old you are. I think when you wrote it, I don't know. How old are you today?
So I just turned 15.
You just turned 15? And you have what's going to be a best-selling book. It's just...
Oh, thank you.
Oh, no, it is. It has to be. It's so good. Your insights, your intelligence. I don't know. At your age, I was also reading a lot, but I never put together a book at that age. And it's so well done. So we're going to talk about it. And I just have a few blurbs I want to show people so that they know. So here's one really nice one, and it's by Matt Williams, creator of Roseanne and Home Improvements, and he wrote the book Glimpse. And I'll just read parts of it. Simone has written an inspiring book about the influence of classic Hollywood films. And it goes on, and he's just raving about you. And he says, the young author takes us on a delightful tour of the golden age of Hollywood. I love it. Just got such a kick out of that one. And
you flatter me, man. Wow. You?
Well, this is so fantastic. I haven't been so thrilled about a book like this. It just everything about it, because as I said, I love film. I worked in Hollywood for a little while at one point.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Nice.
And so I just want you to talk about where this whole story comes from, and about also the forward. So explain this whole teenage golden age podcast.
Yeah, so when I was 12 years old, I was actually creating other podcasts.
Oh my.
And I did a couple of them. They were very amateur because I was 12 years old. One of them was about spying. The other one was about national parks. And so my good friend who lives over in New York, she asked me to help her create one about her passion, which was classic movies. So I got super into them. I started to write scripts that she would read, and I decided it would make a really good book. And my mother is an author, and I have tons of writers in my family, so I sort of knew how this kind of thing would go. And I wrote a book proposal, and it got accepted. So I wrote this book about why classic Hollywood is still relevant today, and especially to teens.
She writes a book proposal and it gets taken. It's just, this is so great. This is such a wonderful story. Now I'll tell you something funny. The oldest guest on my radio program, I've had the radio program for 9.5 years, and I've had the YouTube channel for half a year. My oldest guest was 100 years old. We celebrated her 100th birthday, and she had just written a book about cybercrime. So,
That's
you
a
know,
story.
yeah, because a friend in a bank, and so she decided to investigate, and she wrote a mystery about cybercrime at the age of 100. So I'm
That's it. I
calculating
was
how many more years of
100.
writing you're going to do. Oh, oh, Simone, you just, I'm in awe of you. You are so fantastic. You give me hope for the future. And what I love, and one of the things that's important, young people today often don't have long attention spans. They're so used to all this little stuff, a few seconds here, a few seconds there. And then the wonderful things about old movies, and I think you've probably discovered it, it does something to you when you sit back and you watch. Just watch an old film.
Yeah, that's very true. I did, I talked a lot about how when I was starting this journey with classic movies, I actually it was hard for me to sit down and watch the whole thing, and I found that when I started to just sit down and watch it for, 10 to 30 minutes, I would get super into it and I wouldn't be able to stop watching it. So it really just takes that first couple of minutes and then I got really engaged.
So tell us the first classic movie that you watched that really grabbed you.
Well, I the first movie that I actually watched was Audrey Hepburn in Funny Face. And I I was very lucky because that's one that really draws you in with the opening number, which is Think Pink, and it's all these models in these gowns, and it's this fashion stuff and this huge musical dance number that really draws your attention, so I didn't have to wait a long time for that to draw me in. And then I started watching a lot more musicals, and I gradually sort of worked my way into the more talking kind of movies.
The first time I arrived in Paris, I started dancing down the street singing Bonjour Paris because that movie influenced me. I don't know how many times I watched it because it was everything to me.
Oh, yes, it's Audrey Hepburn in
And
anything really draws you in, you can't stop watching her.
oh, exactly. There's any of her movies. You just from the Nun Story. Oh, I love that one. Everyone. It's just amazing how these actresses just they had very distinctive personalities. Each one is different. You have Audrey Hepburn, and then you have Catherine Hepburn. What a
Very
difference! And she
Yeah,
certainly set style.
both of them did,
Yeah.
definitely, yeah, especially with Katharine Hepburn and the pants. She was one of the first women on screen to wear pants, and Audrey Hepburn obviously set a huge style standard for all of us even today.
So you started watching the films, and then at one point you started really devoting a lot of time to it. How did you do that?
Yeah, so as I said, I was writing scripts for podcasts for a while. So I've always been a writer, I've always been a creative person. So I've set aside that time in my life. And at this point, that time in my life had changed into watching movies and taking that critical eye and thinking about what I saw in it that I still saw today and what I could pull from it. So I really took my creative eye and really turned it to critical, and I started writing about just all these different movies, all these different actors through a critical, creative lens. And I really enjoyed writing for podcasts because I didn't have to talk like sometimes I did in my other podcasts. And I got self conscious of my voice, so I found that writing was a really good way to do that because people could imagine my voice however they wanted to. Um, and I just got really engaged and interested with how much I could learn with these classic movies.
Now, did your parents and your grandparents were they surprised by your interest in these old movies because they all went to these old movies?
Yeah, I think definitely at the beginning they were interested, but I've always had weird obsessions. I was a magician. I tried every odd fruit in the supermarket. I did all these funny things and I wrote about them when I was like less than 10 years old. So they're a little like, "Oh, Simone always does these weird things. This is just her new one. It'll pass." But they loved it. Anyways, yeah, my parents and my grandparents, they're all writers. My grandparents are journalists. My other grandparents are is a professor. So they all have their own little obsessions, and so I was able to talk a lot with them about these classic movies, and because they have their own weird things, and a lot of them are into film too.
Well, of course, for your grandparents, particularly, I'm not sure what age they would be, but if it was back in the 50s, date night, going out on a date in the weekend was so important in those days. That's how people socialized. The kind of movies they have now aren't really date movies that you come out sort of dancing like with musicals. You'd come out of the theater dancing and singing, and so which dance movies did you really love?
Well, the first movie actually that I watched before my whole classic movie obsession was Mary Poppins.
Oh,
So I got super into that. I got super into that as a 6-year-old. I loved the little cute dance numbers and the songs. And then after I got into classic movies, I was really super into 1950s musicals. So I did like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes and all the Maryland stuff. Let's see what else. Singing in the Rain, stuff like that. Then I got into 1930s and Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. And so all those movies, I would leave the theater or my living room dancing and singing. So I really enjoyed that because I'd never really had that experience before with a current day movie.
well, I wrote a film for Debbie Reynolds. Um, it went into turnaround in Hollywood because
Wait,
we had the financial crisis in
oh
2008.
my god.
So,
You wrote a film?
yeah.
I love
So
Debbie Reynolds.
when I actually got to write a film for Debbie Reynolds, it was a thrill because my mother would always sing good morning" to us in and I carried that on. I still do it.
Well, that yeah, I mean, that movie actually isn't about the in the scene, it's not about them going to bed, it's about them staying up all night, which I
Yeah, I
find funny
know.
because people use it in the other context where they're like, "Oh, I'm getting up. Good morning,"
Yeah,
you
good
know?
morning. What I love is that by encouraging young people to see these films, because I was surprised that they were not seeing these films. There's so much enrichment that they can receive from watching these films. And I love all the different chapters that you've created. So let's talk about that a little bit. How did you come out with the idea for the different chapters? You talk about uh, interracial movies. Talk about those.
Yeah, so I wrote a chapter called I think it was about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. So I talked about the criteria really for each chapter was that it had to be relevant. So I found that movie really relevant, and I thought that despite the fact that some of the things they say in it might not be things that people say today, I thought it's something that a lot of people should see, and it's something that really reflects our current day world. And I was quite interested to see how the dynamics played out within an interracial marriage because the time was so different and the way that the parents acted, it really taught me a lot about the racial dynamics of the time, which at the time I didn't think I could learn from a film.
Well, that's what these films do. You learn so much because it is exactly the as things progress, how things have changed. If we go back to the well, actually in some of the early movies, the 30s movies, women were very strong in those movies. But at some point also this sort of development of the woman persona of taking charge and being in charge. Uh, I noticed that you definitely cover that.
Yeah. Um, I really took the feminist stance in this book because that's one of the many things that have changed since the golden age ended in 1968, in my opinion. And so I really wanted to talk about how in a lot of these films, especially in 1930s movies, there would be the way that women acted was actually not that different. It was very modern. And then when the Hays Code sat in and was like, "Oh, we're not going to allow women to be independent anymore." They started acting a lot more, demure and like you would think a woman would act. So I found it really enlightening to go back and watch those movies from pre 1934 and see how the women acted because there were working women who made more than their husbands. There were women who raised children on their own. There were women who were heads of companies. There were women who were gold diggers and dancers. They just had everything.
Yeah, it is. It's a remarkable story of Hollywood, of how they went through the years and the changes they made to society. At first, with black actors and Asian actors stereotyped, but as things went on, we saw the changes. That's one of the beautiful things people can learn from these films.
Yeah, definitely. I wrote a chapter about Anime Wong and
Oh,
how she was Asian diversity before that really even happened. There have been very few all Asian cast films actually, and so I wrote about that in context to her cuz she was going to be before she died in the film from 1961 called Flower Drum Song. Well, it it isn't exactly relevant today and it has a lot of racism, to be frank. But it was interesting to talk about her and how she came before all these movies like Crazy Rich Asians and the Joy Luck Club and stuff like that. I thought people don't really know about her.
oh yeah. Talk a little bit more about her because I think her how she got into film is fascinating.
Yeah, so I actually consulted a lot of experts when writing this book because I'm obviously young and I don't know everything about these movies. So, one of the great things was in the process of doing this podcast, I interviewed a lot of people and I made a lot of connections. And one of the people I made a connection to was Katie G. Salisbury, who wrote the book on Anime Wong that came out this year. It's very popular. It's called Not Your China Doll, and she gave me a lot of really interesting insights into Anime Wong, which helped me write the chapter in a way that I felt really reflected who she was. And so I talk about just a lot of her movies in the 1930s and how she was represented, how she was treated, how she was turned down from a lot of movies because they wanted to cast a white actor in her place. So she faced a lot of struggles that I tried to depict in that chapter.
She was remarkable. When you go back and look at those movies, they are fascinating. So you've mentioned that you spent months watching movies, and I hope you didn't get crazy on popcorn, but it certainly was quite a task when you look at the work that you've put into this.
Yeah, so I wrote the book over a very, very short period of time. It was about 3, 4 months. And, so I was watching, like, probably a movie a day, and I had to sort of absorb this information really fast. So when I actually go back and I'm like, I don't really a lot of them I'm like, I remember it, but I don't remember exact things that people said because when you're consuming media in that fast of a fashion, not how you're supposed to be doing it, like, most people don't watch a movie a day and write 3,000 words about it. So it was a very interesting experience.
Very intense. How did all the noir movies affect you? I love noir movies.
Yeah, they're pessimistic. They didn't make me feel that happy when I finished, which was a very stark contrast to what I'd watched before, which was the musicals. So I didn't particularly like them at first, but then I found my sort of groove with the Barbara Stanwyck and the Lauren Bacall. And once again, I said I love strong women. So those really lured me in, like they're supposed to, all the femme fatales. So those are the things I love in film noir, not so much the men shooting each other.
That's a downer, but so many of the men are so good looking that you don't care who they shoot.
I mean, a lot of them are old, so I'm not one to say.
Oh. Well, you're more Andy Hardy movies. Did you watch Andy Hardy movies?
I did, yeah, I mean, the ones with Judy Garland?
Yeah.
Yeah, I like those. Although Mickey Rooney, I didn't like him in Breakfast at Tiffany's, though.
Oh,
So,
no, that was
I don't like
terrible.
him
Oh, that was horrible. How they let him do that.
Yeah, I actually I find it kind of funny that people reference that movie so much, and they just seem to forget about how Mickey Rooney, like, dressed as Audrey Hepburn's weird Asian neighbor in this horrible makeup, and it
I
was kinda disgusting to watch.
Wow, that was bad. But we've changed. Of course, Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland, they went through that whole Hollywood studio system. So what did you discover about that when you were working on this?
Yeah, so I read a book called The Genius of the System, which I think that's the title. I forget the author because once again, I was kinda reading a lot of books, so I don't remember all the names and the authors, but I do remember the information. Anyway, so it taught me really how blunt and harsh the old Hollywood system was. They treated their actors like objects. They did a screen test. They changed their body, they changed the way they dressed, they changed the way their faces looked. They dyed their hair, they made them these perfect, shiny, golden images to project into the world. They put them on dates with Cary Grant, you know, and I never really knew that stuff before, and it brought a new light to the movies.
They had a whole production system and they dyed so many women blonde. like they must have run out of peroxide because they had this obsession.
But, there's a funny story about actually, I think it was Ginger Rogers, who's my favorite actress. They dyed her hair blonde without asking her. They just she's like, "Oh, you're gonna cut and do my hair for this scene," and then they dye her hair blonde.
They had such a system. I mean, we're lucky in a way that they did because that's why we have so many great films and then also what they consider the B movies. But still, today, those B movies are often so much better than what we're getting today.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, I saw this movie, I don't think I would ever, ever wish on anybody to see it again. It was, I think it was called Argyle earlier this year, and it was the worst movie I've ever seen. I'm like, I would prefer a Mickey Rooney B picture to this. Just put that on, please,
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 please.
right?
As a writer, I'm sure you've noticed the dialogue in some of these movies. It's so good. It when you think about some of these movies are 60, 70 years old, 80 years old, but the dialogue seems so fresh. And as a writer, you're like, "Wow, how did they do it?" Because I don't know if did you watch Arsenic and Old Lace?
I have not.
Oh,
Although
well,
Cary Grant is my favorite actor.
the dialogue it moves so fast and it's so clever. There's no way you can stop watching that movie. And one of my other favorite is The Women. That
Oh,
was
yes, that's one of my favorites. I always recommend that one first.
oh, don't you love that? Oh,
I
that
love it. It is
ah,
it's genius. I love
it
it.
those women, each of them, the way it opens, I love that opening with the animals.
Yes, and then there's another scene where with horses in Vegas, I think,
Yeah.
that I thought
Oh,
was
oh,
funny.
isn't that funny? And of
Yeah.
course, Joan Crawford steals that movie. And the dialogue, again, very smart, but it also touches on a very serious subject, a divorce, an affair, and a divorce. So it's very modern in that
Very
sense.
very serious subject in 1939.
Well, no,
Especially for
still,
especially for women. Well, the thing is, it's like it's very much still relevant, but then the way that they treat a divorce for a woman is higher up on the, sins list or the bad things you can do as a woman, and that's really interesting to watch. But I find that sometimes the most interesting old movies have this sort of thing that's still relevant today that's just dialed up by a lot, you know?
I think the scene there with the daughter. is so beautiful. It portrays the problems sometimes of a divorce, and that's why that movie is really so great. It stood the test of time, and the remakes. Well, I hate most remakes, and the remake
Oh,
of
I
that
didn't
movie.
I wouldn't bother. I didn't even see.
Don't not it's not worth it.
Well, also when that movie, I think the remake of The Women came out, I was not even born.
Yeah,
So I
probably. You
yeah, I
weren't
was.
even born. Oh my goodness, I forget. 15, it's so cute. You said you like Cary Grant. What other actors did you particularly like?
You mean actors and actresses?
Let's do the actors first.
Men?
That
Okay,
I
well,
mean, you're
I like
young, but still, did you find
Gregory
some?
Peck,
Oh, I
Fred
love
Astaire,
Gregory.
and, I mean, I like Gene Kelly's dancing.
Oh
I'm
yes,
not I don't think he's that great of an actor, to be honest,
no,
but
but
I
his
like his
dancing's so
dance.
great, and well,
And
because
also Donald O'Connor is really good.
you're right. You're right. Now you covered a lot of movies, not just the 30s, 40s, and 50s, but also into the 60s. You got to the Beach Babe, Beach Bingo Baby ones.
Beach Party.
Yeah, Annette Funicello and all of those ones. What did you think of those movies? Those are so corny.
Yeah, so I was actually there's an interesting story to this. So I think it was last fall, I was sitting and watching a movie with my mentor, Laura. She wrote a book on Marion Davies, and I was trying to brainstorm chapters for the book at the very beginning. And she was like, "Well, what do you think is a niche that you really wanna write about?" And I was like, "You know how there are always those movies in the '60s that are like the girls that are in their bikinis on the beach? Like, what's up with that?" And she's like, "Well that really reflects something on the '60s," and, yeah, so I was like, "Oh, chapter."
Chapter.
'Cause, um 'Cause it really does teach you a lot about women in the 1960s, and I talk about, the fine line between objectification and, feeling free and feeling like you can express yourself.
It was a different feeling in those days. Of course, it's about the relationship between men and women, what was allowed sex wise, what they could do, how far they could go, and of course the beach movies where they would all of a sudden music, they'd all be playing music and they'd be dancing on the beach. Did you like
Beach
that?
ball, beach blanket bingo.
So did you like those ones?
Mm, mm,
No.
well, it wasn't so much that I liked them, but they were enjoyable flick things that I would put on to just have fun.
Yeah, well, that's I mean, that's a purpose, that's a purpose of it.
Yeah,
Now
I mean, and also it wouldn't be the first thing I would pick by
no,
far. I
no,
would
no.
I would recommend Gidget though. That's the first one I talk about. Gidget is basically the predecessor to the Beach Party movie, and it's a lot more emotional, and it teaches you about teenage girls a lot more than the Beach Party movies did.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was a better production, more intelligent all around.
Yeah,
But
and my my grandmother is friends with the original Gidget.
oh,
She was the daughter of the screenwriter.
wow. Oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's nice. So you know Gidget, that's great. Um,
Well, I'm hoping to meet her. I got to give her the book.
oh, absolutely. That's fantastic. Then we get into these there came a time where there's sort of a very dark movies in the 70s, not very cheerful movies.
I didn't watch those ones. That's the joy of it. I didn't have to watch. I was a very small period of time that I talked about, and I didn't have to watch like Taxi Driver or anything,
Oh,
which
good, good. The one I love the 40s. My dad was in the army, and the only thing good that happened to him when he was in Europe was that he met Marlene Dietrich. And yeah,
right.
because she was a wonderful woman. She insisted upon going right to the front where they were having the Battle of the Bulge. She had them drive her in a Jeep right up to the front where the guys were. and my dad got to meet her. He said the only good thing that came out of his time in Europe. So that's partly how I think I got so interested in movies. Did you like her movies?
Yeah, I actually haven't really watched that many of her movies, to be honest. I watched Shanghai Express, which was really cool.
Actresses, they're always acting, but there's something very natural about her. Wearing fatigues, she would wear a helmet in the back of a US Army Jeep. She was just so kind and so sweet. What other 1940s wartime movies? Did you like wartime movies?
Yeah, I liked the very fun or like frivolous wartime movies, if you know what I mean. Like My Sister Eileen and
Oh,
Kitty Foyle and just all the Ginger Rogers movies from the 1940s are perfect. And just all the movies with the women as the stars of it, like I like the Natalie Wood and the early Natalie Wood, and I mean 40s. Let's see, Barbara Stanwyck,
oh,
definitely.
definitely Barbara Stanwyck. Every one of her movies, I just love. Throughout those years, there was a strength in her that really came across the screen. People felt if she could do it, I can do it, kind of thing.
Yeah, and she's always just so fun on the screen. I'm like I want to hang out with her, so
Yeah,
I can.
exactly. You didn't feel that way about Joan Crawford so much. You didn't want to hang out with her.
I mean, does anybody want to hang out with Joan Crawford? Really?
um,
You're scared of her, right? Everybody's just
so
scared.
but there were other what other actresses of the wartime period did you like?
Rita
Was
Hayworth.
oh Rita Hayworth. Yeah, she's Mexican, and people didn't realize that because when Hollywood got a hold of her, they changed her.
Yeah, well, I talked about that a lot in the tour of the Hollywood studio system chapter, how they just completely changed her look because they didn't want anybody to know who she actually was.
Yeah, exactly. Well, they wanted her to be perfect, and she was on the film. In those films, she's so gorgeous. It's like it's still after all these years when you watch and you say, "How did anybody look so beautiful?"
I said amazing makeup artists is how.
Ah, yes, yes, a wonderful makeup artist. But you also tackle some interesting subjects, and one of the chapters you have Jews run Hollywood. Why did you include that, and what is that about?
Yeah, so I oops, sorry. There's
Oh,
a
that's okay.
text message. There's a text message because 'cause I'm a young person. It's okay. Um, anyways, wait, what was the question again? I just got super distracted because it's a
The chapter called Jews Run Hollywood.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Anyways, so I am Jewish, and I have a uncle of mine, a pretty distant uncle, who was a screenwriter and blacklisted in Hollywood. So I was wondering, like, and then I realized that all the founders of Hollywood were Jewish, and I started to see, Jews control Hollywood, and I sort of wanted to talk about the conspiracy theories in the movies about Jews and how they are portrayed and how they're very overrepresented in Hollywood and how that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's because actually when Hollywood was starting in the 1910s, Hollywood was one of the only places that paid well that would accept Jews to work, and it was a new place to work. And so once those people started being successful, they obviously hired more Jews. And so it's really not that complicated. It's not a conspiracy.
Exactly. Now, did you see the movie Gregory Peck's Gentleman's Agreement?
Yeah, so I talk about that one. That one kind of it was very interesting to watch, and I enjoyed it a lot. Um, it's about this reporter who pretends he is Jewish, which you could not make a movie about today. But it's really interesting to see how they actually treated Jewish people because a lot of the things that they discriminate about just don't exist. Like, for example, when he said he was Jewish, they wouldn't let him into a hotel, and people physically treated him badly just in the everyday life. So I don't really experience that as a Jew. So I wanted to talk about how things have changed and how that that movie really shows you how.
Well, they show in the film, of course, it's not just him, but even his son gets beaten up. Um,
Yes, yeah.
and so, and and the doctor doesn't want to treat him. It's just a brilliant movie. It is a movie that, if people watch it now and they understand some of that, and exactly what you said, that this was an area where Jews could get in, because in a lot of places they couldn't get into businesses. Um,
Yeah.
it's as simple as that. Um, and of course, being creative and being book people, and that, I think, also is one of the things that in old Hollywood, so many of the people who were in control of the studios were people who read books, which is why we have a lot of movies based on historical characters or on books. That's because they read them.
Yeah, so I find it really interesting that a lot of the movies that we had in the golden age were based on short stories or poems or books. Most of them were. Like, if you see in the credits, you can just click on really any classic movie. You'll see, like, based on blank poem, based on blank story in the credits. And this is really because they the people who were deciding to create these movies were just reading all the time, and they were reading with the mindset of what would this make a good movie.
Exactly. I mean, I read that way today. I've read thousands and thousands of books, but when I read a book now, when I'm reading it, if I see it as a film in my head, by page 10, I see it as a film in my head, I know it's going to be a good book because they've captured me.
Oh, yeah.
It's funny, the old movies feel more real than the ones that they make today with all the modern things. I mean, we know the old movies were made on a Hollywood set. When you watch Shirley Temple movies, you think that she's in India. No, you know she's not in India. But when you
Mhm.
watch that movie, you think she's in India.
Well, there was this grand sort of not life thing to Hollywood that was sort of just in people's heads. And now that we have the internet, we can see whatever we want on YouTube all the time. So I think we underestimate how the effect movies affect the mind. So when people watched black and white movies all the time and that was all they saw, they dreamed in black and white. So, and then when they it moved to Technicolor, they started dreaming in color because I dream in color now. So that just shows you just how profound the effect is, and it had a very high stance in culture back then.
I still love black and white movies because they understood lighting. If you look at an old black and white movie, when they shoot at night, you can see everything. You see their faces, the lighting. Each actress, her face is lit with different lights, so you see everything. And today they shoot at night and everything is dark. You can't see anybody. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, they really had the entire system of it down back then. They knew how to do everything.
I love to think of those days and the excitement of being in a projection room watching, as the film was being shown.
Yeah, it really is. I During the writing of this book, I really put myself in that theater and thought about what the people must have been thinking.
Now, you talked about how actresses influenced the modern performers, from Beyonce and Lady Gaga and all of that. They've all been influenced by these old movies.
Yeah, I think it's something about definitely the fact they had everything down and they just knew how to create these iconic, lovable scenes that everybody would remember. And then, second of all, you have to remember that these are the first movies, really. They're the first movies. This is the first 30 years of movies. So these movies set the groundwork for everything that came after it. So copying is just what's going to happen when you have a new industry like that. And when you have such prolific stars, it's going to be referenced all the time. And especially since it's the first of it's the first movies, it's the first actors to do everything. It's just inevitable that it's going to be replicated.
So, what performers today do you feel draw upon that past history?
Yeah, so I think definitely Taylor Swift. She has a song called Clara Bow. She has a music video where she's Elizabeth Taylor. We have Lana Del Rey, who did, I think, a music video where she's the movie Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. She's that. Um, and I think Lady Gaga, who obviously was in A Star is Born, the remake.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that Attack of the 50-Foot Woman. All of those movies in the 50s, the ones like The Blob and all of those horror movies. Did you watch those?
No, I didn't have time to get into horror because, quite frankly, I don't enjoy it. It scares me, and so I was like, I don't think I have to do this. Do I have to? So I didn't end
You
up
didn't.
watching it because I'm scared. You can understand it.
Oh yeah, exactly, exactly. Why I thought of that is because
Wait,
it's like,
wait, I did do Hitchcock. Does that count?
yeah, okay. What
I
Hitchcock
did
did you do?
Hitchcock.
What
I
Hitchcock
did
did you like?
I watched basically all his important movies. I think I watched Rope, I watched, North by Northwest, I watched, uh, what was that? The one with Jimmy Stewart and Doris Day. For some reason, I'm blanking on the title. And then I watched To Catch a Thief.
Oh.
All of those. There were jump scares, so technically maybe horror.
Did you watch The Birds? No, you didn't watch
Scary.
that one. Okay.
Scary. It's
It,
scary.
it is scary. You live in California?
Yes.
Okay, so in California, you can go up to that location where he shot the birds. You can go drive up there, and
Do
you
I want
drive.
to?
Yeah, you want to drive up there, and you want to be driving. Well, you're not even old enough to drive. I can't believe it. She's not.
No, I'm learning to drive.
You're learning to drive. Well, one
Learning.
day when you go up there,
No,
then
I can drive in 6 months.
oh my goodness. Well, you can you can drive a convertible and go up there where he shot the birds. That's
Convertible.
from the movies you've seen. What locations do you want to go to? Now they're not going to be the same, but it's like for me, um, you know, when I watched some of these old movies, I wanted to go to the places. Eventually, of course, they they weren't the same. But have any of those really intrigued you where you'd like to go?
Yeah, I think I would wanna go to the Singing in the Rain set, the Gentlemen Prefer Blondes set, because obviously there are iconic set pieces that I would wanna see. I would wanna go where they filmed Some Like It Hot in San Diego,
Ah.
and I think anything Ginger Rogers, so sound stages for dance movies maybe.
Oh, I it's just so adorable. 15 years old and you've written a great book. It's just fantastic. Now that you've done this one, they're going to come back and they're going to ask you to do more. I think there's a lot of more movies ahead for you. Um, what grade are you in 15? I can't remember. Was this what is
9th
that?
grade.
Ninth
Eh,
grade. I love it. It's not many times that a ninth grade teacher has a student who's written a book.
actually, my teacher has, like, 2 kids who are writing books.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
This is
One
fantastic.
None of them are nonfiction, but so I can still keep that, but there's definitely other kids writing books,
Well,
definitely.
this is so great. It's really so wonderful. I think that you're an inspiration, and you will be an inspiration for people. And this continuing with the podcast.
So, my friend in who's the host, she's so great. She wrote a foreword, and she interviewed me recently on the podcast, so there's that. And I'm also we're kind of separated into categories now because 'cause I'm the book and she's the podcast. But I'm definitely planning to make some appearances for this last season because 'cause she's gotta go to college. So, it's the last season now.
Oh, she's older than you.
Yeah. Mhm.
Oh wow. Yeah. It's wonderful. I think you, as I said, you're an inspiration. You're doing something fantastic. And have you influenced your friends to watch films now? Because so many young people are not reading enough, and it's partly that not having the attention span.
Well, hold on, let me tell you something. Have you heard of Book Talk? Bookstagram, Twitter. There's a lot of kids on Book Talk who are reading stuff like, romance novels by Emily Henry.
Good.
They're reading
Yeah.
they're reading, but it's, like, not s it's not, it's not The Catcher in the Rye, but it's still great.
Well, so what are you reading now? In ninth grade, what do you read? Catcher in the Rye in ninth grade.
I read that in 7th grade, but, I lately I've been on, like, I love novels lately, but I this year I've been reading a lot of nonfiction. I love nonfiction that tells a story that's sorta like a novel because that's even better. I love memoirs, smart stories that are kind of making fun of themselves. I can't have something that takes itself too seriously.
Uh, You are really quite amazing, and it's a honor to have you on here. I know that you're going to be writing more books, and it's a thrill to meet somebody like you. What you've accomplished is amazing. So I just want to give your website, right? And
Yeah.
where else can they see you? Social.
Yes, I'm only on Instagram, not TikTok. I'm on Teenage Golden Age Book. I'll keep you updated if you follow me.
Okay, well, thank you, Simone. Oh, Elias, you are wonderful. You are so smart and so clever. Your family must be so proud of you.
I am planning a book tour right now.
Okay. Where are you going? Oh, wow. You have
Yeah,
to tell us.
so I have some events already around California, and I'm planning other places, but I technically can't say yet.
Well, that's wonderful. Well, you're going to have lots of fun and you're going to inspire a lot of young people, I think. So, again, thank you so much for being on Joy on Paper Live. I enjoy giving people a chance to really meet authors that they might not have thought to read this book. But I think after they see this, because this is for everybody, everybody
Oh, yeah,
will learn. This is not a book for kids. This is a book for everybody because anybody who loves film, I think everybody will enjoy it. As a matter of fact, I want to tell everyone this is going to be a great gift for the holiday season, and we're going to do a special promo for it. Get it for Thanksgiving too, because one of the things that many people do on Thanksgiving, they sort of binge out on films for that long weekend. This is ideal. Get this book, bring it along, and watch these old movies. Because, as you said, you can see these films on YouTube, and most of them you
yeah,
can
a lot
see
of them are
free.
there for free, yeah.
They're free. All you need is this book, some popcorn, and YouTube, and you can watch all of these films that Simone has written about. Simone, it's really a brilliant, brilliant book. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Oh,
Thank
you're
you so much.
fantastic. Bye bye now.
Hi, I'm Simone Elias, and this is my book, Old Films, Young Eyes, A Teenage Take on Hollywood's Golden Age. It talks about why old films are still relevant today in many different pop cultural landscapes and why teenagers should watch them. I've got a new interview on Joy on Paper Live that was such a joy to film, and I hope you'll tune in and watch it.
Wow, it was so much fun to talk to Simone. She is so fantastic and an inspiration, and it makes you have real faith in the future that we have young people like her. Just so intelligent, so smart, and at 15 with a published book, she got a book deal for goodness sakes. You know, and it's going to be a bestseller, I'm sure, because it's a wonderful book. Get this book, give this book, and just keep it on your side table by your comfy chair. And when you're scrolling through YouTube and looking for something to watch, um, you'll get ideas from her book, and I'm sure you'll love those films. So please, please get this book, Old Films, Young Eyes. She is a wonderful writer, very talented. And since you are on YouTube and I'm on YouTube, I would like to ask you, please, please subscribe. I need subscribers. You know all about this algorithm guy who lives in our televisions. I'm trying to imagine what he looks like. A little bit of a wormy guy, but he's, going around all these YouTube programs and he's looking and he says you have to have so many subscribers before you can monetize. You have to have so many subscribers before you can do this, before you can do that. Anyway, you people who have been on YouTube for years, uh, understand it better than I do. So just push that button, subscribe. One little push. Just push that button, subscribe, and just help me to promote Joy on Paper Live, because you might not think that you need Joy on Paper Live today. I have a lot of interviews, and you never know which interview is going to inspire you. And if you listen to some of the interviews on Joy on Paper Live, you'll discover which authors were rejected so many times that you can't believe it. Authors who were rejected 65, 75, 100, 200 times, and they're now best-selling authors, and some of them have like 30 million books out there. That's what is interesting about my interviews. One of these interviews might be just the interview you need to be inspired to write your own book, or just to make your life better. It'll get you moving, maybe in another direction. You'll say, well, I could do that, or I should go there. So please subscribe to Joy on Paper Live so I can bring you more interviews with wonderful authors. And thank you for joining me today. Bye bye now.